Okay, heads up before we dive in today, my friend. I know I promised that there was going to be a second episode of the poetry series this week, and that episode is coming. It's just going to be pushed because something came up. What, you ask? Well, just a moment. Recently, an invite dropped into my inbox. Did I want to swing by a school in my city to talk about teaching ninth grade English for them next year? They really needed to fill a hole for a year. Just one hole, one course, one period, one group of kids for 1 year. Did I want to do it? If I did, what was my vision for the course? Whew, honestly, the flood of emotions about knocked me over. On the one hand, maybe I could act on the ideas I've spent all my working hours cultivating for the last decade. How I would love to design my room, my book list, my units, using all the materials I've developed and hopefully making a real impact in the lives of this class of students. On the other hand, the struggle. The school was already using a textbook to teach ninth grade English, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I imagined total freedom to craft the course of my dreams, but of course, the school would already naturally have arcs and norms in place. They might not want a vigilante substitute looking to repaint and refurnish her classroom with stacks of choice reading books while teaching podcasting and multimodal memoirs, hosting literary food truck festivals and one-pager fairs, and submitting to New York Times writing contests. But maybe they would. I'll be taking that meeting soon, tomorrow, in fact. But in the meantime, I've got a question to answer. What would my vision be for this course? So just in case you too are trying to define your vision for a ninth grade course, I thought I'd brainstorm right here along with you. One final note. For folks inside the lighthouse, this episode will also serve as a fun look at how I'd use materials inside the lighthouse to build my course. All the visuals you're going to see in the blog version of this podcast are pulled from resources already available to you inside the lighthouse. Okay, let's dive in. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more. More creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. First things first, my theme for the year. The theme I would want to take on in this course would be identity, the formation of identity. The first year of high school sure does involve a lot of figuring things out. I'm finding myself on a little trip down memory lane here, and maybe you are too. So I feel like freshman year, that's a great time to focus in on characters struggling to figure out who they are, why they are, who they connect to, what they want, where they're going. In short, identity. And while in the end, I think pretty much any and every text can be connected to this theme, I'm going to try to curate a collection that will be especially helpful to 14 and 15-year-olds looking for answers on these questions. So my first core text that I would want to teach would be The Outsiders. I often see this taught in 8th grade, but I happen to know this particular group hasn't had it yet, and so I would be really excited to open with The Outsiders. It's such a good book. It would be easy to think that The Outsiders might be a bit dated, but the themes in this book are universal to all teenagers, I think, and that's certainly been my experience working with teachers teaching it. In conjunction with the text, I'd want to explore the new musical version on Broadway that a friend in my network has introduced me to. And I would also want to have an ongoing project throughout the unit in which students brainstormed, designed, maybe even built apps that would build connection beyond the polarized bubbles they find themselves in our nation. So I think The Outsiders really gets at this idea of polarization, the sort of greaser versus socks thing, which is now very much an issue in our modern world, right? And it's pushed forward often by social media and the digital bubbles we're in. And so I like the idea of inviting students to try to design an app on their phones that could work against that polarization, that could help connect people, build relationships across boundaries, help people get to know each other that maybe they wouldn't necessarily reach out to if they weren't in this app. What will those apps be like? I have no idea, but I feel like it's very relevant to students to find out what is the process of app design? What's a wireframe? How do you do user testing? How do you do design thinking? I think all of those processes are relevant to their futures. And so I like the idea of building in this kind of entrepreneurial social media design unit that helps counteract some of the big problems of the digital world into a unit with the outsiders. Okay, next up, another core text I would want to address is Romeo and Juliet. This is a really popular 9th grade text, classic text, right? A lot of schools want you to cover it anyway, but I think it would really be fun. I would want to look at Akala's hip-hop Shakespeare. I would want to bring in Gareth Hines' amazing graphic novel version. I would want to bring in Taylor Swift's Love Story and the Folger Library podcast Shakespeare Unlimited. I would want to look at things on the My Shakespeare site and the Royal Shakespeare Company's reels on social. I think there are just so many inroads to make this text accessible, exciting, to see multimodal interpretations of it. I would want to do acting in class. We would definitely do acting games, scene performances. I would probably try to bring in a theater artist from the community or do some kind of a theatrical field trip. And then to culminate this unit, I would have students create visual stories, possibly love stories, or maybe stories in which people rebelled against some aspect of their family life or stories related to family. I'm not sure exactly, but somehow after looking at the Gareth Hines interpretation in the graphic novel form, I would want to work with students on writing their own stories and translating them into visual form, and then doing a visual exhibition on the walls of the school of those stories. So like a story museum, and invite the younger kids at the school to come up from the lower school or the middle school and see the work of my 9th graders. Maybe the 9th graders would also put on a workshop for some of the younger kids. Like maybe the 1st graders would come up and they would work together on creating visual stories. I like that idea. Okay, next up, this isn't exactly a core text. I guess it's a core set of texts. I would definitely want to do dystopia book clubs. There are quite a few dystopias that show up on lists for 9th grade, like Lord of the Flies, Animal Farm, Fahrenheit 451. These are all popular reads for 9th grade. But rather than choose one and really drill down into it, I'd rather go broad. I'd like to go deep with dystopia, but wide with text. So students get like some exposure to a bunch of dystopian texts and can talk with each other about themes and settings and characters that are coming up across these texts, while, really getting the zoom with one text that they find most interesting. So I would likely want to include Animal Farm and Fahrenheit 451 as options, but I also think I would consider The Hunger Games, Neil Shusterman's new, very striking dystopia, Dry. I had some questions about some of the intensity of the scenes in that book, but my 8th grader just read it and was pretty much like, "Oh, Mom." So maybe I shouldn't be worried about any intensity in the scenes. I'm not sure. I would think about that a little bit more. The book Feed, which is kind of a tech dystopia, and I think could feel really relevant and interesting in conversation. Possibly Ready Player One, though again, I'd have to just be a little careful, make sure that I think that text would work for 9th graders. It might be too mature. Anyway, there are so many options for a dystopian book clubs unit, and I'd be very excited to dive into this. I think it's something that students really respond to right now. A ton of popular books have been written around it. At the same time, I would be showcasing in my choice reading library like The Maze Runner and Divergent and all the other fascinating, compulsively readable dystopias that are out there. So it'd be like deep dive across choice reading in class time dystopia. I would want to talk about the theme of art and influence, which is always on the forefront of my mind when it comes to dystopia, like how authors are wielding their influence when they play on our emotions with dystopia and why they're doing it. But I would also want to be looking at this ongoing theme of identity. How are these different characters responding to super intense external circumstances? How does it shape them? How do they rebel against it? How do they figure out who they are in the context of these really difficult situations? I think many of our students are going to relate to some of that. I mean, I don't feel like I'm living in a dystopia, but I feel like there are things that are happening in these books that are very reflective of things that are around our students right now. And so I think they find that relevant, and when they find things relevant, they respond to that, and they're more engaged, and they go deeper with their learning. So, yes, dystopian book clubs. Okay, next, core text, long way down. You knew this was coming. You know how much I love Jason Reynolds. I have yet to talk to any teacher anywhere who taught long way down and didn't find it to be incredibly engaging, wonderful text to teach with their students. Plus, Long Way Down is another powerful look at identity and the forces that shape it. Reynolds' protagonist, Will Holloman, feels really trapped in the neighborhood that he's in the rules of the society that he's in. And the central question of the book is he allowed to break them? Talk about relevant for teens, right? Who are trying to figure out where they're supposed to push boundaries, where they're supposed to stay in the boundaries, how they're supposed to deal with the norms and social obligations of high school, depending on how they actually feel about them and who they want to be and who they want to become. It's a great text for studying identity, in my opinion. So I would be very excited to look at Long Way Down. I think I would do an open mind project with this text where they go deep into one of the characters' minds and really do some intense character analysis. And I might consider pairing it with an open mind project on themselves. So my most recent iteration of the open mind is that inside, visually inside the mind of the character silhouette, they show relationships, pressures, characteristics, quotes, and then on the outside, they have these forces that are shaping the character. It could be a person that they're close to. It could be some element of their history that's really shaping their future. It could be the setting that they're in, whatever. I think this could actually be very interesting for students to do about themselves. I'd want to talk to them up front about whether we were going to display these. I feel like an open mind about yourself could be intensely personal. So it might be that we would display the ones they made about characters, but then they would have their choice of whether to display the ones they made about themselves. And this, again, could lend itself to an interesting workshop going into a grade of younger kids and doing an open mind project with the younger kids, either about a character in one of their books or about their own lives. Okay, next, and these are not necessarily in order. I haven't had enough time to think about exactly how I would order all this, but I would definitely want to do a choice book unit and a literary food truck festival. I think this project and the idea of doing a choice unit can be a really nice foundation for choice reading. So certainly I would want choice reading to be a significant component of the class, and I would want students to be reading books of their choice throughout the year. But kicking off relatively soon in the year with a choice book unit gives me a chance to galvanize interest around a bunch of books, right? One for every kid. If I can find a book for every kid or help them to choose just a great book for them early in the year, then I'm going to have all of their backing for those books, right? They're going to pitch those books to each other in their literary food truck festival. They're going to be a wealth of information on why that book is readable and interesting and fun. And their book talks and their chat with their friends about hey, you should read this. I read it during the choice book unit and it was so good, is going to be more valuable than any pitch I can make for the rest of the year. Though, I think my pitches are great. They're never going to be as important as the pitch of a student's best friend. And so by positioning a choice unit early in the year, I'm setting students up to be PR agents for books throughout the rest of the year and sort of getting that wheel of momentum turning. Plus, I think the Literary Food Truck Festival tends to be just a real engagement booster in general. Students feel proud of their work. They feel excited to participate in the festival. It's a great way to bring parents in and get them excited about the course. It sort of makes space for the wider community to become involved in the course and be interested. I just think it's like a nice early in the year option. It can be great at any time, but for me, I'm thinking early in the year. Okay, next is a short text I would want to do, The Paper Menagerie. You've probably heard me say before, but I love Ken Liu's short story, The Paper Menagerie. It is wonderful. It's this fascinating mashup of sort of realistic fiction and magical realism slash fantasy slash sci-fi. It feels very real, but then a tiny paper tiger in the story is alive. And so you have to kind of, you just have to accept that as part of the story. And it's wonderful. But this story, again, fits in with our theme of identity because the main character's struggle is sort of how much to incorporate his heritage, his cultural identity, his mom's culture as an immigrant into his life story. And he really rejects it for reasons that he makes very clear. And it's sad and powerful and thought-provoking. And then at the end, it seems like he's kind of coming around and he might embrace it. And so there's a lot of room to think and discuss and talk. And I think it would lead well into a poetry workshop revolving around George L. Lyon's I Am From poem, where students would write their own stories, where I'm from, maybe create a collaborative poem or video where they all share pieces of where they're from. There's a wonderful collaborative, crowdsourced I Am From poem in audio on NPR that I would certainly want to use. And I think I might then use that poetry activity as a launching point into a larger performance poetry and poetry in general unit. Maybe this would come in around April, National Poetry Month, or maybe not. It doesn't matter that much. But as students were getting interested in poetry after the I Am From workshop, I think I would introduce a performance poetry tournament where they're voting on their favorite poems day by day as the poems advance through the bracket to the final winner. And I think I would introduce a performance poetry event like a slam or jam or open mic where they're all going to be performing a poem, maybe in town at our local coffee shop or maybe on campus at the location of their choice. And in preparation for that event, then we'd be doing poetry workshops and we'd be watching these different poems in the tournament and talking about why we like them or don't and which ones are the best and why. And we'd just look at a lot of different poetic takes on identity. And I think that would be a great unit. Okay. Next, and I think this would maybe have to be last because there would be a lot to pack into this year, but I would like to do a full memoirs book clubs unit, but I just don't think there would be time to do full memoirs. And so what I'm thinking is memoir excerpts. Maybe we'd look at the chapter Chameleon from Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. I love that chapter. Maybe we'd look at pieces of Malala's memoir, Michelle Obama's memoir, some graphic memoirs like Persepolis, Mexicid, Where the Stars Are Scattered, and Mouse. While we're reading these different pieces of memoirs and talking about how people share aspects of their identity and life and reflection through their work, then I would want to do the narrative writing unit that I created this year, which I'm really excited about. I would love to teach this unit. I spent so much time creating it, and I would really enjoy that. And so that unit revolves around students creating multimodal memoirs. So they write stories, but then they also include maybe audio clips, video clips, photo essays, like some other aspects to enrich the stories. And I think we would culminate that in a multimodal gallery which we would maybe try to put up on the school's social media or the school website, or share it out somehow. Maybe we would try to find a partner classroom in another country so that we could do an exchange and share pieces of our stories, comment on each other's multimodal galleries. I'm not sure, but I feel excited about the possibilities. Okay, if I was to have time and I could go in more directions, I would be interested in doing Genius Hour with my ninth graders. I would be interested in doing the Ethics of AI research project. I would be interested in designing a book club unit focused on mental health, which is something I don't have already created, but would enjoy creating. And I would be interested in doing a theater unit on Hamilton, which, again, I would have to create. I'm not going to go deeper with those right now. I'm not sure we'd have time, and I've already packed a lot into this episode. I do want to do one little touch here at the end on the classroom space. I have spent a lot of time dreaming of my ideal classroom space, and undoubtedly, this would be one of my favorite parts of the job, is setting it up. Describing my plans for an ideal classroom space would be a whole nother episode. So instead, if you're curious, I'm going to point you toward the free classroom design kit that I made last fall, because it sort of pulls everything that I have thought about this together into one pastel colored rainbow package. And I think you will find a lot of fun resources and ideas. I would want to have an extensive library, flexible displays, flexible seating, flexible resources, elements of nature, a costume shelf, a small writing maker space. Those are maybe the most important elements of the space for me. Possibly a giant chalkboard wall, definitely some kind of independent work counter as close to a window as I could get it, classroom playlists and fun timers, a prize drawer worthy of the name. Honestly, I would really enjoy setting up the classroom. I'd have to be careful to remember to come home at the end of the day on days that I was setting up my classroom, because I feel like this is something I would get just very excited about and very into. So I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for hanging out with me as I brainstorm the possibilities for a ninth grade curriculum. I don't yet know if I will be teaching this curriculum. I'm really thinking it through because, of course, I already have a full-time job and a full-time family, and I am writing a book. But gosh, I sure did feel a lot of excitement in thinking this through, whether I do it or not. So until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.